The only thing I remember was just like my final solo on the top of Zakk's head. You know, I've got this JEM, it's probably bashing all over his head. He brought the Passion and Warfare prototype 7-string guitar, which would later go on to be the guitar that was on the record cover. They blew a Marshall stack up behind me. They didn't tell me they were going to do that. I walked out of the whole record deal. It was like a big reaction to it that I wasn't expecting. People were like, oh, you're back? You're doing guitar again? What's this? I was like, wait a minute, it's been like 20 years since I did anything. Like, how does anyone remember anything of my past?
Thomas McRocklin, it's a pleasure to be talking to you today.
Good morning.
Good morning. So if we go right back to the beginning, it's fair to say you were a prodigy. A lot of people think these sort of like kids absolutely shredding an electric guitar, like all came up in like the YouTube era. There were like these 6 and 7 year olds nailing it. But you were doing it long before then. How young were you when you started playing guitar, and what inspired you to pick it up?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on here. It's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, going back to like, how did I pick the guitar? It was actually my dad. My dad was really into rock, metal, Van Halen, Ozzy, early David Lee Roth stuff, which all I love. So there's lots of guitar stuff in there. And he loved the guitar, but was never a big player, but he was into it enough to have one around the house. He would go to work, he would leave his guitar hidden behind the TV, and I would always drag it out. And that's kind of like how it all started. I would come back from school, pick it up straight away, he'd find me playing it, and then once he saw that there was an interest in guitar, he was like, let's teach him some chords. And he wasn't like a virtuoso or anything like that, but he knew enough to like get me started. And once I just nailed, I think it was like maybe Thin Lizzy, The Boys Are Back in Town, like the chord changes, and it sounded like something like real. That's when the bug sort of started, you know. So, and I was like 4 or 5 at that time.
Wow. How many hours of practice were you putting in a day back then?
Yeah, it quickly ramped up. It got to the point by the time I was like 7, I was playing at least 8 hours a day. I mean, it was just an obsession. It's just whenever there was like nothing else happening, guitar was like just right there all the time on my lap. Even breakfast time, like my dad would feed me like muesli and porridge, and get that porridge down, you boy. Sitting playing. It was like, yeah. And you know, back then there was no distractions, you know, there's no tablets, internet. So what else was there to do? Play guitar all day. Well, that was about it.
What were you playing like when you were that young? What were you, because you developed into some real sort of shred stuff quite relatively quickly.
Yeah, I guess between 7 and 8, you know, that's when like the sort of shred obsession came in, when I heard like the early Roth stuff, all the EVH stuff, and maybe even the early Satriani stuff, like Surfing with the Alien stuff, and Paul Gilbert, and all that stuff. And I think by the time I got like the Tony McAlpine BC Rich guitar, that's when I was like 7 going on 8, and that's when I got really into the shredding, and that led to getting my first Ibanez JEM. But yeah, a lot of shred stuff, and going into like being 8 to 9, that's when I was like all over the place, tapping, trems, dives, you know, all the classic techniques were there, you know.
Yeah. And then you were gigging that stuff from quite a young age as well, right?
Often in places that I shouldn't have been. I mean, that was always like hilarious. I mean, my favorite place was like social clubs, because, you know, there'd be like strippers on and stuff like that, and they'd either hide me behind Marshall stacks, or I'd be booted out the place, and I'd be looking through like the back doors, this little kid, and then they'd rush me on to the stage and stuff like that, and pubs, and yeah. So gigs started really early, and I think that was a good thing, because it just helped me to just be confident, because I was actually really shy, and it was very difficult to get a conversation going out of me when I was a kid, which made for some horrendous TV moments, like just so awkward, so bad. But the playing and being comfortable playing on a stage in front of people, that developed really, really early, which I think is a good thing.
And what did audiences make of it?
I think they were just in shock a lot of the time. Like, you know, they were expecting some nice little tunes, and then it's like a Marshall cranked up and there's like full fireworks, you know. It's just like, what on earth is going on here, you know? But it really caught people's attention, and it's kind of that type of mentality and approach that led to my first big gig supporting Ozzy when I was 8 years old. I mean, my dad was a bit of a chancer, you know, he would try things and often they would just work. So the Ozzy gig, for example, Ozzy's playing in Newcastle, we're obviously going to go. And the next thing you know, I'm like this little kid dressed head to toe in leathers, big cowboy hat on, boots 5 times too big for me because you couldn't get cool Steve Vai like boots like in my size. So I'd look absolutely ridiculous. But it worked because like now we're like knocking on the back door of like Ozzy's gig. So, you know, management, security, whoever, look at me and think, what the hell is this all about? Drag him in, plug me into Zakk Wylde's amp, and then next thing you know, I'm whittling, going crazy. There's harmonics flying everywhere, and then just that leads to Ozzy go, whoa, let's get him on tonight.
Did you get to spend much time with Ozzy?
Not a lot, and I was petrified because I loved Ozzy. I mean, you know, listen to the early Randy Road stuff with Ozzy and some of my favorite tracks, you know. The only thing that was in my mind was just like the rumors or stories of Ozzy biting the head of a dove or something. And he was behind me on this picture with like, you know, and he's like arms right out, like wrapped around me. And I was just like, that's actually Ozzy behind me. Yeah, I was petrified, but he was super cool. Zakk Wylde was super cool, and you know, they all liked enough of what was happening to like bring me on for like 15 minutes before they played in what was the Mayfair, Newcastle.
It's amazing. I mean, how many times do you hear that story now of someone turning up on the day of the gig and then just getting put on that night? It's a different world.
Totally. You know, with all the curfews and everything being like so meticulous these days. But yeah, I mean, it's that type of approach, like, that led to me meeting Steve Vai, and you know, we didn't even have tickets to Monsters of Rock. This is like maybe 88, 89, maybe 88. We just drove down to Donington because David Lee Roth was playing, and obviously all the other bands were amazing, but in particular we wanted to see Steve Vai and David Lee Roth. And no tickets, no passes, no guest lists, just turn up, drive right through security because I'm dressed again like this little rock star kind of kid, like absolutely wild. Security lets us drive through. We're parked up right beside Steve Vai's caravan because like they had tour buses, but it was like these caravans and stuff as well. And that's when I recently got a Steve Vai floral gem, which I still have. That's seen a lot of miles, that guitar. But yeah, it's just like, right, little Galleon Kruger amp, powered up, sit in the back of the car with a boot lid up, and play. And then someone, like his guitar tech or someone saw me play, spotted the gem, and it's like, get him in the caravan. Next thing you know, Greg Bissonette's there and Steve's there and the rest of the band, and I'm trying my best to play Tobacco Road. And again, situations like that led to the relationship with Steve, and then later getting to do the audience's listen video, and then Steve going on to produce my first band, and just chance moments, you know. My dad's chancer.
Wow, it's incredible. I mean, how did the relationship with Steve sort of evolve from there? So he just gave you his phone number and you got in touch? Or?
Yeah, pretty much. So I did that, and then a little while later, I guess when the Roth tour ended, and he must have been working on Passion and Warfare at that time, because I was in California, in Los Angeles, and I was staying at the hotel that I think around this time there was like a bit of record label interest in the US, Interscope Records specifically. So they brought me over to probably play in their office and stuff like that, and just see, hey, can we form a band around Thomas here? So I was in California, and yeah, there was a knock on the door, and it was the Ibanez Artist Relations who we'd been speaking to for just a little while at this point, and he brought a couple of things. He brought the Passion and Warfare prototype 7-string guitar, which would later to go on to be the guitar that was on the record cover and the back, and that, you know, seeing that for the first time was like, wow, you know, because it was a new thing. It wasn't even released, this 7-string model at that time. So it was like, whoa, that's awesome. And then there was a cassette of Passion and Warfare unreleased, and I listened to it and I was like just absolutely mind blown. And from that point, we went on to do the Audiences Listening video. So it was all kind of similar sort of era.
What were your memories of the Audiences Listening video shoot?
The only thing I remember really was I had to learn the song as best as I could just for the parts, so it looked realistic as possible. Loved the track, so I was always jamming along to it anyway, which really, really helped. There was just some things that, you know, like they blew a Marshall stack up behind me. They didn't tell me they were going to do that, so that was just like a natural reaction when you see me like tense up, you know, that. They had snakes and spiders on a set, which I hated, and you know, there was a bit of, you know, the other kids that was part of the video were like running around with these things. I'm like, oh no, this is horrible. But the best part, I think, for that shoot was seeing Steve shoot his sort of end scene where he's doing the whole whatever he says in the video, like the fire and the flames or something. I can't remember the exact words, but that was all shot on blue screen, and just being there in the sort of sports hall with a big blue screen and seeing Steve do his performance for the same video, like that was pretty cool. And you know, at the end, I'm like up on his shoulders, and there's some pictures somewhere of that, and it was just like, it was like that was the last scene of the whole video shoot, and yeah, super cool.
Amazing. I mean, Steve went on to be kind of a mentor for you. What was the most important lesson you learned from him?
The sort of tonal aspect was really, really cool because he had so much gear. I mean, it was wild, like, and I was staying with Steve for like weeks at a time during the recording sessions. So, you know, there was Soldanas, Haflers, like modded Marshalls, pedals. It was all the rack stuff you could ever imagine. So a lot of the time, you know, he was like playing around with these stuff. He's like, he used to call me Rocky. Play Rocky. So I'm like playing. He's tweaking all the amps, and then it's coming through in the control booth. And then we're just trying different things with all these amps. And a lot of that really stuck with me. And, you know, in terms of like the routing, like we'd have this dry guitar tone, but then we would want some eventide delays or reverbs. And then he'd show me how to route it all through the bus and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff really stuck with me over the years as well. But during that time, Steve wasn't playing at all. Yeah, he was like, he probably took more than a year off from playing. So he would almost never pick up a guitar in the studio and just play something. It would just, you would never see it. In fact, right at the end of the Bad for Good sessions, he had a guitar vault, which is where I'd spend a lot of my time just like pulling out flames and heart-shaped guitars. All the classic Vai stuff was in that vault. So that was a good way to spend your evening as a kid, you know. But like towards the end of the Bad for Good recording sessions, he kind of flipped the switch and started to get back into playing himself. So he'd go up into the guitar vault and just like really lock in. And sometimes I'd just go up there and sit and watch, and you know, you could see like his chops and dexterity just getting better and better, you know. And I don't know what album he was preparing for at that time, but it was interesting to see that transition from like no guitar playing whatsoever, very little, to like flipping the switch and then getting back into like playing.
But you're also songwriting with Steve as well during this time for Bad for Good. What is songwriting with Steve Vai like?
So Steve at that time was writing songs which I think were, in hindsight, just a year or two out of touch for Bad for Good. Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Bad for Good itself was right on the money in terms of connecting with audiences. The Bad for Good band didn't love the Refugee record or songs that was on it. So we would always spice them up heavily when we played them live, and it was much more relatable. Looking back on that record now, I'm much more fond of that record now because I'm into more of the retro stuff in general. So now I'm like, yeah, that's a great record. But at that time, the band didn't really love the record or the tracks. We loved our own stuff that we played and made, but a lot of that didn't make its way to the record. I had maybe 2 or 3 tracks like Curious Intentions, where I wrote the main verse and chorus for that. There was a sort of funk track which I wrote, and then there was an instrumental track which I wrote entirely called Tire Kicking. But yeah, in terms of the actual flow, I would just receive tapes and tapes and tapes, and it was all like sort of somewhat produced Steve Vai riffs that sounded very Vai-like. It sounded a little bit like David Lee Roth meets Whitesnake meets passion and warfare. It was definitely something of that time. And I mean, from a guitar point of view, very, very cool. But I think commercially is just where it was just that little bit out of touch with what was happening in the early 90s with the launch of grunge.
What was the moment where you realized Bad for Good was kind of done?
When I walked out of the whole record deal, you know, I think what was happening is we were doing a lot. I was on tour with a band, and we did the Joe Satriani gig where we would support Joe for like a couple of months or maybe longer, going from Canada right through to New York, back up to LA. And it got to the point where I would do like maybe 3-4 months in California and then a week or two in my hometown in Newcastle. And it just got to the point where every time it was like my final couple of days in Newcastle as this young teenager hanging out with friends and getting to be social and in a new way for the first time, it was like, oh, got to go back to California and, you know, do this stuff. And I know it sounds like crazy because like in a lot of ways it was like the absolute dream to be living in Hollywood and LA and doing all these things. But having done so much by the time I was like 13, 14 years old, it was like it just felt like the tables had turned. And every time I'd come back to Newcastle, it was just like, oh, I just want to do regular things. And that kind of did lead me to like walking out of Interscope Records, which meant no more Bad for Good. And I think that took a lot of people, you know, in LA by surprise. But fair play to my dad, because he always says as soon as it wasn't fun, no matter what you're doing, we're going back to whatever you want to do. So there was never pressure. He was never like the type of father to be like foot down, no, you're staying and you're seeing this out.
Really? I mean, you did come out of that experience with the Passion and Warfare guitar, which is a plus. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the moment you received it?
Yeah, that was in that Beverly Hills hotel. Yeah, opening that guitar case that the Ibanez artist relations guy had dropped off with that Passion and Warfare cassette, and just seeing the guitar for the first time, like a swirl finish. I'd never seen a swirl before, never mind this 7-string with the handle, which the handle never made it to the production models, but it was just absolutely amazing. That guitar, it's got such a vibe. It's got a really unique sound. It's very very rich, and it's almost eerie to play that guitar. You know, there's just so much of Passion and Warfare was recorded on it, and when you sit it down and play it, it's a vibe. It's crazy, but it still sounds amazing to this day. Even the pickups and everything, just really, really cool. But yeah, that guitar, it's faded a little in color, but it's still just as awesome as it ever was. Really cool guitar.
And one last thing from this sort of era was that you were the youngest person to play the Jason Becker benefit concert. What are your memories of that day? Because that was a pretty star-studded affair.
Oh yeah, that was wild. Jason's just such a legend and such an amazing player. That was just so chaotic is what I remember about that. Just, you can imagine all these guitarists arriving for sound check, and it was just mental, absolutely mental. But there was a little bit of like friction, shall we say, where one of the guitarists there had seen me play, and he was assigned to be with me, and he was like, F that little bastard, I'm not playing on the stage with him. And a lot of the guitarists, in particular Zakk Wylde, he was like, he wasn't afraid to speak up, and he really did, and he had some words to say about that. And I ended up playing with Zakk and someone else on that gig, and Zakk really like was the complete opposite. He was all for it, and in fact, you know, by the end of the songs that we played together on that benefit gig, I was on Zakk's shoulders, and he's a big guy and he likes a few beers, you know, so, well, he certainly did back then. Yeah, that was a wild gig, and the only thing I remember was just like my final solo on the top of Zakk's head. You know, I've got this JEM, it's probably bashing all over his head. He's swaying around and he's had a few drinks, and I'm sure I probably saw my dad like, you know, like almost ready to catch me, because like, you know, like pretty high off the ground on a stage as well. But yeah, that was like the sort of main thing. Like, it was just an interesting mix of like who really appreciated what was happening and who was like all for it, who didn't want anything to do with it, no part of it, and were quite vocal. And guys like Zakk that just came through, and there was lots of other guys who were like, you know, screw that guy, you know, everything's good.
Did that affect your decision in sort of leaving LA as well? Like hearing some of the sort of detractors as well to what you were doing?
I don't know if it did, because I think I was so young that I didn't really understand a lot of what was going on in general. In terms of like the bigger picture and the overall vibe, you know, it was just very much for me, it was just like turn up, do the gigs and hang out with all these, you know, amazing guitarists that were like childhood heroes, and it all became normal in that sense. Yeah, it's a little bit sad in a way to like have guitarists that are known to that extent to be quite negative to someone that was probably like 11, 12 years old or something at that time. I couldn't imagine being like that, you know, myself, you know, not being encouraging. But ultimately, I don't know if that type of thing had much influence on me not staying in LA at that time. I think it was more just wanting to be a regular kid and go to the beach, play Laser Quest, and do all these normal things for a change, where that became more fun than all of these gigs and tours, as crazy as that seems now in hindsight.
Why did you walk away from the guitar in general?
I guess I sort of walked out of the LA thing by the time I was like 15, 16. And then I became obsessed in drum and bass, like breakbeat and jungle music and stuff. And at that time, it was very difficult to incorporate guitar into electronic music. I had like a Tascam 8-track, a bunch of rack stuff, but it wasn't like now where you just jump into Ableton Live or whatever DAW that you use. It was a little bit challenging to integrate, and I did have this sort of unreleased electronic album that I did as a teenager. Before that, I actually did like a full-on guitar instrumental with live drums that was called 91 to 95. And then I did some tours in the UK with a vocalist. We did like tours supporting Glenn Hughes, I think it was, from Deep Purple. Really, really cool. But ultimately, underneath all this was like this obsession with electronic music. And there became no place really for guitar to easily integrate. And once I stopped playing, it just didn't really occur to me for many, many years to just pick up. And it got to the point where after so many years of not playing, it would feel so alien, like picking up a guitar, and like all my mechanics and motor skills and dexterity, the strength, everything just felt horrible. So I just never bothered to put that effort to get back to where I was until many, many years later, where maybe in 2016, I picked up the guitar for the first time, and I was just starting to be on social platforms, like even just like Facebook at that time. And I just posted just a random little clip playing a Fender Stevie Ray Vaughan Strat, which I have somewhere as well. And it was like a big reaction to it that I wasn't expecting. People were like, "Oh, you're back? You're doing guitar again? What's this?" I was like, "Wait a minute! It's been like 20 years since I did anything. Like, how does anyone remember anything of my past?" Because 20 years in guitar land is like an eternity. But from there, the obsession just out of nowhere almost, the spark came back, and the love of wanting to play came back, and then the obsessive personality came in, and then that was it. I was really practicing hard because I had so many years to make up for. And that began the sort of start of the next journey. But it was a very difficult and long first year just to really work on the actual techniques again.
What was the hardest thing to sort of bring back?
The hardest thing was not what to bring back, but it was... So what happened was I started to play, and I was doing 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, and I was in the living room. So my wife and kids were like, "What the hell is this?" Out of nowhere. There's like suddenly pedals and amps, and it's all growing in the living room. And I'm like, "Oh, this is great. I've got all these Ibanez's that need fixed up. I'll get trems and pickups," and well, you know. But what happened was I immediately became the player that I was when I was like 13, 14, which was a little bit Vai influenced, a bit of that era influenced. And I remember I went to Brooks Wackerman's, I think it was Zakk Young's wedding, and Brooks was there, and I went to Bogner Amps factory, and I was just jamming around on an amp, searching for like tones that would kind of relate to as a guitar player after so many years off the guitar. And one of the guys walked past, and he's like, "Hey man, that sounds great. Sounds just like Steve Vai." And I remember I was like, "Oh shit, this can't happen again, like not again. Like I can't have, as amazing and lovely as Steve Vai is, I didn't want to have the Vai association again as an adult." So the hardest thing, getting back to your question, was how do I get 10x better than I was ever or more, but have this new sound that is more of my own and identifiable. So that was the most challenging thing. But when I got back to the UK after hearing those heavy words of "just sounds like Steve Vai, man," that was like the start of a new thing, because I really started to work on like playing in different ways in terms of like all the default fingering positions that I would gravitate to use. I would spend maybe a year or so breaking every habit that I had and had built over the sort of time really practicing to push into this new sort of territory as a guitar player. So those words were like quite heavy on me, but made a big impact. But so coming up with a fresh sound was the biggest and most challenging thing.
Wow, yeah. I mean, what influences were you drawing from then to completely sort of rebuild the way you were playing?
Drum and bass, electronic music, Skrillex, anything. I love rap music, hip hop. So anything but guitar, really. In terms of like phrasing, a lot of the rap stuff I would listen to, I would kind of try and emulate some of the phrasing and the sort of rhythmic cues that you would get from it. So yeah, I wasn't listening to any guitar stuff at that time, and I think that kind of helped. I think it's so easy to kind of hear guitar stuff and like you get sucked into like trying to be that impersonation of that and stuff. And yeah, so not a lot of guitar stuff, and I think that helped. Not saying everyone should do that, but it certainly worked for me.
That's interesting. It's a similar mindset to sort of Polyphia. They adopt a similar approach in terms of like pulling from rap music for some of their phrasing and things. It must be quite gratifying almost to you to see how like the guitar scene has changed in recent years. There is a lot more crossover with electronic music.
Absolutely, yeah. It's super cool now. Some of the stuff guys are doing, like bands like Polyphia and so many of the instrumental guitarists that have their own thing going on. Yeah, it's a different beast entirely now. But I think one thing we have to be really careful of is like the guys that are technique first. That's what I like about Polyphia. I don't listen to a ton of their music, but I really enjoy it when I do. And they have that nice balance of, yes, there's blazing flash and it's so impressive from a technique point of view, but then they have these grooves and it's like got melodies that really kind of resonate with a lot of people. So I think they've got that balance like really nailed. And we just have to be careful, I think, in general with, these technique first type of players where it gets so tiring to like hear it. It's like amazing to scroll past it and see it, but you wouldn't want to listen to it for more than 10 seconds. So I think, if we can get that balance, and a lot of guitarists obviously do, there's some incredible guitarists around these days. But yeah, I love bands like Chon and stuff like that as well, because they do that also so well, where they're brilliant guitarists from a technique point of view, but when you see them live playing it, super cool, really, really good. Really like, it's almost like you can sing along, but they're still like complete virtuosos on guitars. Wild, really cool.
And when you came back to guitar, obviously you've been working as like a mastering engineer. Did you pull some of that in when you were coming up with the Polychrome DSP stuff?
Yeah, everything that I learned from a production, mastering side of things, I got really sucked into like just like production. I was like just all in on that, all night, and trying to take on as many projects with as many different genres as possible, just so I could try and compete with commercial tracks on that level. But yeah, the sort of real push into software came from, I got into live streaming, was streaming on Twitch, YouTube. I guess this was probably just after COVID, but I'd started streaming before then, but really got into it like a lot of people during COVID. And the gear that I was using was just getting crazy. I mean, the pedal board was just like just ridiculous, like so big, so many pedals, drive pedals, compressors and stuff. And you know, maybe, I don't know if you can see some of them all. Some of the leftovers from the pedal board are up on that wall now, and you know, it was crazy. And I was using amps with load boxes, and what would happen is like I'd be jamming and playing, you know, comments like, "Hey, that sounds cool. How do I get that tone?" And the answer was just so convoluted, and it was so chaotic, so much gear, so expensive to do all this stuff. So the idea to replace everything that I was using for all the gear with a single plugin, which later became the McRocklin suite. That was like the idea. And at that time, I'd already been approached by some pretty big software companies to do a signature product. And every time I would give them the concept, they would say, yeah, we can do that. And then a couple of weeks later, they couldn't do this part of it. They couldn't do this part of it. And it would just fall apart. But by chance, I was speaking to a guy called Luca, who was my partner at Polychrome. And he had another company that I was using some drive pedals from. And I was like, I'm sick of these guys like really struggling to build this thing. And I didn't want to go through the whole text thing. I was like, I said to Luca, can we jump on a WhatsApp call? And just out of nowhere, he's like, oh yeah, sure. And I'd never spoke to Luca before. Like, he just, you know, as far as I'm concerned, has no idea who I am. But we just clicked and really hit it off. And he's so, he's just a brilliant, not only as a coder, if you like, he's just a super cool guy. And we just really just hit it off. And I gave him the concept of the McRocklin suite, and we got to work on it. And then it turned out to be amazing. And then we launched Polychrome DSP with that product.
Well, I mean, what was the most challenging thing then to put together in the McRocklin suite that the other companies couldn't do?
Yeah, so latency, feel is, I mean, I actually have a guitar here. Yeah, so the hardest part was there was just so many different types of tones, and I was using lots of plugins to make it happen previously. So whether it's super dreamy acoustic cleans, amazing lead tones, and some real fun stuff like synth-oct and stuff like that, it was putting it all together in one package, but with latency lower than any other software or combination that I've used before, because we really work hard on making sure that our plugins are so responsive. You know, a lot of people, when they first try them, they're just like blown away by the feel because it's so immediate. It's just right there on your fingertips. And as a guitarist, you need that kind of feedback. You need to hear it real quick. So the McRocklin suite like runs at 0.073 milliseconds. So it's incredibly fast. And you really feel that on your fingertips as you play it. So that was like a big challenge, but also like developing the sort of real dreamy ambient cleans with grain pitch delays and stuff like that. It was amazing to go from having to use all this gear to like a single plugin, and I took it out live a couple of times and tested it in big PA rigs, and it sounded like a record coming out the speakers. I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I've recently been playing around with a controller to really make it, because we've expanded the amount of products that we have. So here is like the McRocklin suite on the controller here. So if I touch that, I can jump to any of my favorite tones from the McRocklin suite. We have another product which is called Nunchuck. It's a hot take on a Marshall with tons of effects. So I've been obsessing over that to like just get it all dialed in, but it's working really, really well. So Loomis, gritty cleans. From a live perspective, to have like all those plugins and all the tones just right there, it's really, really cool. And even the wah, that's by a product that we have called Cryboy, and it's a sort of version of one of my favorite wahs of all time. So that's just a controller. In fact, all of this stuff is just controls. And it's all Polychrome, so it's pretty exciting, yeah. But the pedal board journey has been it's been that, you know. I got so obsessed with it. I built a duplicate of it to like take on with my laptop rig, and it's got the MCA Pro by Morningstar on there, which is an amazing controller. And yeah, this one it's trying to be as small as possible, backpack friendly. But yeah, it's interesting making that journey from like routing audio and worrying about everything else like power supplies to just worrying about one USB-C cable to your Mac. That's it, guitar straight in. I love it. Yeah.
When you're traveling with that board, what kind of dates are you doing these days?
Right now, hardly anything. I'm so deep into the Polychrome stuff, but I think we're almost at a point where some of the work that we've been doing over the last year, it's about to release, and we've also made some big releases with products like Loomis. Loomis is this guy here, such a classic amp, and it's got loads of effects and stuff. And I'm kind of a guy of like phases, I guess. So heavily working on sort of plugins with Polychrome, and then my band McRocklin and Hutch, which is like a synthwave, retro wave band with shred and melody and stuff over the top of it. We had an album come out maybe about 1.5 years, 2 years ago called Press Start, and that was so cool. Had guys like Jordan Rudess and Michelangelo Batio shredding over these electronic tracks. It's just such a blast. So I'm kind of like at that stage where I'm like just about to get back into like music mode, if that makes sense. And I've got tons of riffs, and we have a slightly new direction in mind for the band. But yeah, I have a complete obsessive personality. So whenever I get into something, it's like so tunnel vision on that. Yeah.
Well, you've also got your own online teaching platform, which is now mcrocklin.com. How did that start, and what lessons do you find your students sort of gravitating most towards?
Yeah, so it used to be School of McRock for like 5 or 6 years. That was a platform that we started to really stop me having to jump on Zoom and Skype lessons at random hours of the day, because you know what online lessons is like. It's like someone's in Australia, Japan, America, and it's like, and you have all this thing of trying to set up the times, and you know, it's just like, So the idea was to just to put all of the most common themes that all these one-to-one lessons into a platform where, okay, you can essentially just go and watch them and learn a bunch of stuff in a very short period of time. So as we built School of McRock in terms of the production quality got better and better, you know, most of this room was just sort of School of McRock really reinvesting in itself all the time. Cameras, virtual production, Macs, computers, lights, you know, the whole thing. It's just, you know, once you start on that game, it's like it gets quick, it gets crazy real quick. But yeah, so now we have like over 250 to 300 lessons, and I think a lot of the lessons that really resonate with people is how to take familiar patterns that you might already know and how to really play them in a new way. In terms of like a lot of guitarists, I find they get stuck with the same sounds, the same licks, the same default positions, but your fingers actually know these other positions, but you just don't use them, or use them in ways that you can really make these new interesting melodic lines and stuff. So I think a lot of the lessons that resonate with people is how to get a fresh new tone and sound, because I think, you know, if you're a guitarist of 5 years, 10 years or more, and then you're just so used to hearing the same licks, it's like, it's fun, it's cool, but it kind of can get frustrating for a lot of people when that happens. So I think a lot of the lessons that really break you away from that approach, but without having to spend weeks on end and 5 hours a day, you know, I was trying to make the lessons as consumable as possible. So even if you have like 10 minutes, we have this section called fast frets, and it's like 10-minute lessons. But I try and like jump to the stuff that I think you'll find the most beneficial in your playing, the stuff that maybe has taken me a long time to incorporate into my playing, but I can pass it on in a really quick way. So I really like to do lessons like that, and all the lessons now, they're all live. So you get that real sense of like, when I make a mistake, you see why, you know, and I get to explain that. There's no kind of edits or anything like that. So it's very real world in that sense. And then we have an amazing community that goes alongside it as well. But yeah, I guess, but the reason why it became McRocklin.com is, as I've learned more about navigating the music industry and how to be a, I don't really say entrepreneur, but you know, just more of that business mindset in general, whether it's following, you know, things through and making something out of it or whatever it is that you're into. But as I've learned more about the music industry, I realized that there was just more that I wanted to share and to pass on to people that might be really beneficial for guys, you know, because a lot of the guitarists that's on McRocklin.com, they want to know how to land a sponsorship, a guitar endorsement, how to release music, how to build things and stuff. And I've been through so much of that, and I think it would be a shame not to also share a lot of what I've learned on that side of things. So the idea is to give more of the complete picture to guitarists.
I'd be remiss not to ask about the guitar sat on your lap there. I know your endorsement with Kiesel recently came to an end, so I'm wondering how much you can say about where you're going next.
Yeah, so I'm really excited by these guitars, Strandbergs, and I actually had another one sent over, which is it's at the moment just me testing them, but from what I've played so far, like they work so well for me because, first of all, they sound and play really, really nice, and they're so light, and I think that can be like a mind trip at first, because you pick them up and it's like, can that be that light and be that good sounding and play that well? But they absolutely do. And for me, I'm like keyboard and mouse all day. Look at how we need to tweak this, and it's like I have this guitar on my lap so much. But yeah, so who knows? I mean, right now this is a guitar that I've had for a couple of years, and I recently put my custom Fishman pickups in it, and then from that moment onwards, I was like, oh, this is like a dream. It's just it just plays so good, and it's also like having played the same type of guitar for a long time, to play something that's just fresh, it's just really give me that extra bit of inspiration. And I'm very much if something makes you want to play more and inspires you, then run with it. And it doesn't matter what it is, it could be a Fender Strat, Gibson, Jackson, Charvel, whatever it is. If something really resonates with you and it makes you want to pick up the guitar more, then just absolutely go with it. And these guitars are really doing that for me right now. So who knows what will happen in the future? I've known Ola for a long time. He's a super cool guy, and I really respect what he's doing with the brand and the innovations that's going into these guitars. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not at that stage where we have anything official, but so far I'm really enjoy playing them, and that's all I could ask for at this stage, that I don't end up going into a situation where I could take 20 years off from playing guitar again, because I think you'll see me with a walking stick then, maybe playing banjo or something. It's no more 20-year breaks, please.
As long as we can keep finding these guitars that inspire you, we're safe.
Yes. But yeah, these are really cool. Just the tuning stability, it's things like that just make all the difference. You pick this guitar up, it's always bang on, and I do a lot of big bends, a lot of big trem dives all over the place, and when you play a chord and it's just absolutely just intonated and so in tune, and you're not having to go and stuff like that, yeah, it's really, really cool. It just works really, really well for me, and yeah, very exciting.
Amazing. Well, it seems like a good place to leave things, Thomas. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.
Excited to see what's coming next with Polychrome, DSP, and maybe Strandberg.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Thank you.